So I framed my talk into 140 slides. We're going to just kind of go through the slides. The whole slideshow is available on my QR code, so you can download the entire slideshow with all the details later on, because there'll be some references and different things. So basically, the formative beginnings of education for women's elocution in PHE Canada, Emma Scott Rapp Naismith in the Margaret Eaton School, 1901-1942, learning from her story. And is that the wrong button? Wrong button. So where did I start? I was doing PhD work, and I was thinking about a topic, and one of them, my advisor wanted me to study the history of time in sport, which would have been interesting. But I've seen in different places how PHE Canada, or Canadian Physical Education Association, began in the Margaret Eaton School. And so I'm kind of going like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know much about the school. And there is a little book, Dorothy Jackson, who was a teacher at Margaret Eaton School, and later at the University of Toronto, wrote a little book about 3 schools. It's the same school, but it's sort of 3 different stages. I started to find stuff, so I thought, well, let's go to the University of Toronto. And I asked the receptionist at the Z building, and I said, anything on the Margaret Eaton School? And she says, yeah, I got all their calendars. So I took all their calendars and photocopied all of them. So then I had all the calendars, which gave me the teachers and all that kind of stuff. The Robarts Library had a scrapbook from one of the students. Then I went to the Ontario Archives and spent weeks just going through archival material. And then as I was leaving the University of Toronto, there was an older lady, which was probably younger than I am now, but I said, do you know anything about the Margaret Eaton School? And she goes, yeah, I go golfing with someone who went to Margaret Eaton School. And so that kind of got me started. And she says, well, I have that first person said, oh yeah, at Christmas time we send letters to each other. So there's about 15 more addresses, and then they knew people, and they knew people. Eventually I got contact with 125 students from the school out of about 450 students, which was pretty amazing because the school stopped in 1942, and I was doing this in 92, so the youngest student would have been 70 years old. Probably half of the students had probably passed already. So that was amazing. So we had mail, phone calls, in person, and then many of them said, you know, when I'm getting old, I'm going to die. I've got this photo book from the school, or I've got letters from students, or I've got a textbook from the school. And my kids don't want it. They're not going to want it. You want it? I said, yep. So eventually I ended up with a cabinet with 4 drawers full of stuff, memorabilia from the school. I'm going to go a little quicker than that, but so basically, Canadian Physical Education Association was formed 90 years ago. So this is PHE Canada's 90th anniversary, as far as that goes. And it was formed with 3 people: Lamb from the McGill University, Cartwright from University of Saskatchewan, and then also Mary Hamilton from the Margaret Eaton School. And she served 2 years as one of the first 3 vice presidents. And she began her term with CPA, and CPA was formed. And she kept it just for a couple of years. One of the other people that was influential in the early development of Margaret Eaton School, as well as CPA, was Florence Summers. So she was the Secretary of Treasury at 35. She helped organize everything a bit better. 39, started focusing on the war effort. She had a book on the principles of women athletics, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. And in the bulletin of CPA, she had various articles passing on her baton, ideals for girls athletics, and basically that comes out of her textbook. And really she meant the importance of, at this stage, of helping with the war effort. 41 again, into the war, helping with the war, and she just basically, maybe just going to the bottom one, talking about the difference of men and women. From her perspective, it's true that men leaders don't understand the physical limitations of girls, and they're not the proper confidants for girls' problems of health and periodicity, so getting your periods. More than this, they don't understand the reason for or the spirit behind changing the rules and regulations of games for girls. And her idea was lots of girls in lots of sports, rather than specialization, which was kind of she felt was the male So that was kind of the spirit that she was bringing to it. 1942, she concluded her presidency of CPA, and it's just kind of interesting, like for the last 3 years, the child's had a little mothering, so she was actually a single woman. Now that he approaches adolescence, he must stand on her own feet among the big boys in the neighborhood. Seems wise and desirable that she be turned over to the male member of the family for more severe training. So she didn't think that she could do that as a woman, but she hoped that a man would take over and do better service of about 15% of the initial CPA membership were had MES connections, different students and faculty. They were involved in different organizational levels, and we'll just kind of keep going here. There's some book reviews that Florence Summers did. Some more here on health and girls and games. Other faculty, Elizabeth Wardley, also did some book reviews. Dorothy Jackson, she was one that wrote The Three Schools. She did a lot of work on physical education during that time. She eventually joined the University of Toronto in 1942 as one of their faculty members. Sometimes when I talk to some of the students, they would say, I'd say Dorothy Jackson, go like, ooh. And they're kind of like, well, you probably know about her. So what that meant was that she was attracted to other women more than she was to men. And that was kind of, so she was a lesbian at this time, but not really open about it, but people were certainly aware of her disposition. Whoops. There's some various articles here. You think of Hawaii Woodcraft. They also opened up a camp, Marion Hamilton did, and more stuff by Dorothy Jackson here on basketball and badminton. She wrote one of the earlier badminton books, and it was one of the first sort of pictures in the CPA magazine. And you see Jackson doing lots of writing for the bulletin. And students did some reviews. Students of Margaret Eaton School did a number of them as well. And again, Wright, they wrote these ones: Humpty Dumpty, Jack Nibble, team swimming, graded dance programs. And then there's also some just comments about Margaret Eaton School leading a refresher course, or Margaret Eaton School doing a holiday course, or leading the YWCAs in their work. And you can see again, just different refresher courses that were done. So one thing after 1942, because it joined up with the university. So the question is a little bit, so well, how did this all start? And the person that started the school was Emma Scott Raff, and she started basically a school of elocution. And kind of think about it. So here's a woman, 1901, starts a school of elocution, and now we're like 122 years later. It's kind of all morphed and grown into PHE Canada. But it was one person's vision, not so much for PHE Canada, but basically it was a school of elocution, but to speak well, you need to have a good lung capacity, a good posture to carry yourself so you can speak well and so on. So that's where the phys ed part came in for her. And let's keep going. Oops, sorry, wrong way. So I wrote an article in the Any Bibliography books, and talks more about her there. She married a fellow, Raff, in 1930. She taught painting. In fact, later on we'll talk about a contributor to this, financial contributor to all this, but I got a little painting that she had made and gave it to that donor later on. That was pretty special. But so she was a painter. Her husband died in 1897 in Owen Sound, and even there, like the family was trying to figure out, where did he die? Like where was he buried, rather? So actually, he was buried in Owen Sound, and I went to the cemetery, talked to the cemetery people, and said, "Where's his grave?" So it was right there. So I was able to give a video for that to the family. Anyway, she graduated from Toronto College of Music. She studied elocution and expression at the Curry School and the Gower School. So she began this school in 1901. And she was also a principal of elocution, oratory, and so on at Toronto School of Music, and a director of physical culture at Women's School, Victoria College. Later on, she married George Gailey Naismith in 1916. And just an interesting thing about George, so he was the one that invented water purification, which was really important in World War I because of being in the trenches and getting clean water. And he also did develop gas masks. So he was significant in his own way. He served for public health in Toronto. It says a little bit about her, like she says, he has an ugly little body, but a pure white soul. That's one way to describe her husband. I think he was like about 5 feet.
That's what my wife says.
And I think she was like about 6 feet tall, and he was about 5 feet tall. So they actually got, he was going to go back to the front. So they went to a church, got married. I think it was just her and George and like 2 witnesses, and that was it. Like then George went off she went off to the train with him to New York City, and then he went off to the front again. So she was interested in the mind, soul, and body, this kind of holistic thing. She came from Ireland, so there was a lot of Irish plays, and that was important in what she was doing. She wrote her own play called The Message. We had somebody analyze that too, but it's kind of this upper-class Canadian home, but you got Negro servants, and using slang speech, and the Ouija boards, and the Bible, and it's this whole combination of different things that she was focusing on. She was a little bit snobbish, a little bit superficial. She loved to travel, and eventually her great-grandchild was Bob Young. Some of you follow Canadian football. Bob Young owns the Hamilton Tire Cats, and he's an entrepreneur who's owned several companies, and he's been really great to work with. He eventually paid Redeemer University, which houses the collection, about $25 grand to digitize the whole collection. So the whole collection is digitized. So if you type up Margaret Eaton School archives, you can find it there. He also paid later on $8,000 for a conference on the Margaret Eaton School, and we had one other person to kick in $2,000. That's been kind of amazing. Finances are important to livelihood. The school needed a building, needed someone to cover the debts, and in steps Margaret Beatty. She's the wife of Timothy Eaton, and Emma needed a building, and Margaret was one of her students, and she goes like, okay, well, I'll do that. So they partnered up, and they built this building just south of Bloor in Toronto, on North Street then, so kind of Bay and Bloor. Now it's a pizza stand and a high-rise. But eventually this was the school that Margaret Eaton built for the school. So the library, or the principal's office, here you can see some of the students. And it's about elocution. Dora Mavor Moore was one of the standout. There's awards in theater for Dora Mavor Moore. And the other person that really comes into play here is Mary Hamilton. So Mary Hamilton, she worked at the Y in Kingston. She taught phys ed at Margaret School from 1910 to 1934. She was principal of Margaret School 1926 to 1934. And she founded a Camp Tamaracoon, which still exists today. So basically she and a student said, you know what, we need a camp. Camping is important for students and for girls. So they went up north. She found a little spot in Algonquin Park and said, yeah, this is a good spot. We're going to build this thing. So this is a woman who just said, okay, we're going to make a camp for girls, and we're going to make it happen. And it's important for women to know about camping and knowing how to teach camping. So the first month of the Margaret School was camp. So kind of like student leadership kind of thing. But the first month of school, so you can imagine going to whatever, McMaster or McGill or whatever, the first month, phys ed students going camping. And just learning about the outdoors and so on. She offered also physical training courses in different places. She had evening courses. Like, these women were just they had a passion for what they were doing. They weren't just teaching it at school, but they were teaching it wherever they could. She taught a little bit of physical education at Ainslie Hall in Toronto. In exchange for that, she could stay in student residence and have a place to sleep. Like they were like 100% in. Like they were just focused on, like Mary Ann was just focused on physical education for girls and women. And that means, sleeping in the student dorms. It's all right. And I'll do it. Just got to keep things working. Student government was important to her. You can see some of the speakers there as well. They had these big exhibitions. This is from World War I, 1919. And these are all students from the various places that she taught at, spelling. They're all crouched out, forming different letters. And this was part of the dance program. And we'll come to that over here. A lot of the dance was tied in with other things that were happening internationally with dance. And it had to do a lot with Christianity, had to do with the soul part of it, had to do with the emotional part, and it had to do with just glorifying and enjoying the gift of the body. There's a lot of nationalism, a lot of Ling gymnastics. Was also done kind of has a nationalistic focus, especially after World War I. Some women colleges in England that were running kind of parallel programs. You can see some of it here. And the Dela Cruz, same thing, connecting theology and gesture and human movement was all important there as well. And again, a lot of these things, like you can see the middle picture of, again, with elocution, good posture and developing kind of lung capacity was, in fact, they would actually measure the size of your chest, because the bigger the chest, the better you would be able to breathe and present. So again, these are some of the other ones. And really, this is from Victoria Patrinsky. The bold and imaginative efforts of a group of women in Toronto made a living through promoting physical culture and professional physical education training in the early decades of the 20th century. And then it comes to the physical part. So the first part of the school was basically 1901 to 1925, and it was really focused on elocution. In 1925, it sort of had like a theater department and a phys ed department. And then 1926, it was just phys ed. So they used a little bit of elocution. There was a lot of great students. Bessie Pitt graduated in 1925. I would visit her about every 2 months when she was a little bit older. She passed away now probably about 10 years ago. But she was like many of these women. She was too committed to her phys ed cause to get married. Because often when you got married, that meant you stopped teaching. And so she didn't get married until she was about 70. Wow. Because she had finished her phys ed career. And now she was joining a camera club in Niagara, and then she met a guy there, and she got married at around 70 years old, and she lived to be in her 90s. She was also, in the 1936 Winter Olympics, she was a chaperone. So you can't just have Olympians going by themselves, you would need chaperones. So she was a chaperone to the Paris team in the Winter Olympics 1936 in Germany. And one of her best buddies was actually R.K. Mackenzie. So she would visit him often as well. And so she has pictures of him as well. The Sergeant School of Phys Ed, Bessie Pitt would go down there and learn from them. So they really had a kind of a shared experience. And it was really about women's rules, different gyms, often smaller gyms, and not over-exerting women. So in this case, you can see that the 3-zone basketball, you wouldn't go out of your zone. So in other words, you'd have the line here. So these 4 players would go to that line and no further. Because if they start running, well, they're just girls and they're going to just get exhausted and they won't be able to have children and so all those kind of things. So that was kind of the thinking behind that as well. And the Margaret Eaton School perpetuated a lot of that. So 1926 becomes just physical education. And so this is really, and here's the schedule of their courses during the day. And most of you who've gone to university would probably not like this schedule. Like, normally you take 3 classes a day or something like that. Like, they start all with anatomy and Swedish and theory of gym, English, basketball, teaching. So they're going like from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, just steady. They didn't like anatomy first thing in the morning, like before lunch, because if you just did anatomy, and they actually used cadavers to dissect them and so on and so forth, and then you had like a roast beef sandwich for lunch, and that didn't always sit well with them. So again, here you can see them in their gym. They use the YMCA in Toronto, or the YWCA, sorry. And there's a lot of this group gymnastics. Kelsey Blair presented at the conference that we had. She did her PhD on women's basketball in Canada. And so she did some interesting things. She looked at the notes, these notes here, and kind of worked with them a little bit. So what do they tell us about what they were doing? So it's just interesting, a lot of things here. This is about a set shot. And you can see point number 13 and 14. Don't jump on the finish. Follow this with aim and step. Poor policy to jump. The policy wasn't biomechanics, but it was about being a proper woman. So you wouldn't want to be jumping as a woman. You just stand the ground. Like you just do this properly. So that was kind of reinforcement. But then Kelsey also mentioned, like, here they're talking about setting screens and blocks and guards and so on for each other, and that was transitioning at the time. So in some ways, Margaret Eaton School, like tactically, was kind of moving a little bit ahead of the game because before then, you guarded your person, but now we're saying, you know what? If we block somebody out, that can be more effective. Now, we shouldn't be touching bodies. Didn't want that, but that whole idea of blocking and screening was something that Margaret Eaton School was actually ahead of some of the male teams at that time. So these are just studied from their notes. In the defensive stance, there's kind of a cross-pollination here between netball and basketball. Netball being more popular in Europe. So there's some more pictures of the physical education, and they still include dance. And then outdoor education. Outdoor education was like really important, especially for Mary Hamilton. So they would spend 1 year they would spend a month at the Outdoor Educational Leadership Camp, and the other year they would spend a month at Camp Tamaracoon. And so here's Mary Hamilton at the Camp Tamaracoon. Just saying, this is like really important for people's personality and character and so on. Yeah, no, it's fine. Oops, sorry. There's a quite a good paper here that you can follow along as well. But the article talks a little bit more about the content of the experience. And one of the things that happened, like they would do canoe tripping, then they would hire male guides to portage. So the women could canoe, but the heavy lifting was males. But at the same time, they were responsible, women, for building some of the buildings at Camp Tamaracoon. They were encouraged to be outdoors, enjoying the outdoors, and to really be physical in recreational activities. And towards the end at Tamaracoon too, they started transitioning to, no, we don't need the males. We can do this ourselves. And so, but initially it was a bit more conservative in its orientation. So there's a picture of Camp Tamaracoon. It still exists and runs programs all the time. It tends to be a bit of an upper class camp. Some girls were there all summer, so parents from different parts of the world would send their kids to this camp, and they would spend their summer at the camp. Some of our Eaton School students having a cigarette So just again, a little bit naughty. They're not quite, they're flirting with the edges a little bit. Bessie Pitt, like I said, attended Margaret Eaton School, went to 1936 Olympics. Actually, she gave me those little crests of Canada in the Olympics from 1936. She said she went to the games, and like the figure skating was on a lake, so it wasn't in an arena. And so she went out skating one time too, and people, hey, stop. So she stopped, and like a little further, there was open ice. So, but yeah, so the figure skating was just on a lake. So we think of, like an arena right now, but that's how it was done then. So that's kind of a little treasure collection I have from 1936. And Bessie Pitt was also a confidant of Margaret Eaton. So anytime Margaret Eaton would travel, often Bessie would go with her. Mary Barker, some of you may know her, but she lived on Cape Breton. She was a mover and shaker also in Nova Scotia in physical education. We visited her with our family once. We said, where does she live in Ingonish? Well, where does she live? They said, just first gravel road, make a left, and then when you hit the ocean, she's right there. And so yeah, she was right there in a little cottage facing the ocean, living with another woman. And I said, don't you feel kind of isolated here? She said, oh no, like I just drive to Halifax and I can fly anywhere. But like they were just really, like a lot of Margaret Eaton School ladies were really independent, go get them. Pauline Seller founded, what is it when you come to a neighborhood? Welcome Wagon, there you go. She founded Welcome Wagon Canada. So again, just starting stuff up. Dorothy Kennedy married Lionel Conacher, the hockey player. And Florence Wiley, we saw many of her notes as well. Now, some of the challenges for the 450 graduates. At that time, often if you married, then you quit job and you were a wife or a mom. As a private girls' schools, it didn't get accreditation by the government, so accreditation was an issue. So they couldn't teach in, say, public schools, but they could teach in universities. So a number of them did actually, and some number were women profs in various universities across Canada. And they were really a significant influence in the YWCA movement across Canada. When I finished my dissertation in 1992, I invited the students I had contacted to say, let's gather for lunch. So people flew into Hamilton from across Canada for this lunch. And it was just kind of like, and they didn't know each other. Because like somebody was a graduate from 41, and a graduate from 36, didn't know. And so it was just really fun to, Bessie Pitt, 1925. So it was really fun to just watch these students, these alumni, get together. And it was just lovely. And then there's Dorothy Walker, familiar to many of us, especially at Nova Scotia. Female athletic leader with a good average. She's leader, obviously, in Nova Scotia physical education, contributing to physical education there. She's a graduate of Margaret Eaton School in 1942. She also went to the Marsh College in Liverpool, England, taught Havergal, a private girls' school. So that was the other place they could teach, but they couldn't teach in government-funded schools, but they could teach in like private girls' schools and so on. She worked in curriculum development, ended up getting an honorary doctorate from Acadia, inducted in the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame, considered really like the mother of physical education in Nova Scotia, chaperoned the Olympic team, just a really phenomenal woman. And I would use these kind of charts too to find students and where they are. I did a paper once trying to figure out they were influential in the Y movement, but how influential? Well, you can see the percentage on the right side. That's the percent of YWCA directors in Canada that graduated from Margaret Eaton School. And so you can see in 1939, 40, 41, almost 100% of the YWCA directors in Canada were graduates from the Margaret Eaton School. So it had a huge influence on the YWCAs in Canada, but also across the world, because these women, they traveled. They went to India, they went to different places. In fact, one of the women, I had lunch with about 8 graduates a number of years ago when guess it was an anniversary of Pearl Harbor, or the movie Pearl Harbor came out or something like that. And one dumb thing in my life was one of the ladies was on a boat going back from Margaret Eaton School to her home in India, and she stopped in Hawaii, and that day Pearl Harbor got bombed, so she was there. And so I should have said, let's go to the CBC and do an interview or something, because just that movie had all come out and so on and so forth. But these were travelers, and they went across the world at different YWCAs doing their things. But certainly challenges of the government accreditation. And 1940s, University of Toronto wanted to begin a Bachelor of Phys Ed program. And so the university needed students, needed faculty. Margaret Eaton School thought if U of T starts a program for some, because we're just, you can't really compete with the university. So they merged. And this is all that kind of remains a little bit. This was the old Y. Here on Yonge Street, you can see the little tower there. That was from the old Y building. And the library, the Margaret Eaton School library went to the University of Toronto. But it's a compromised library, because it's not just the schools from Margaret Eaton School. It's like when a prof would retire, they would throw some of their books in there. It would have been nice to just have a 1942 library, but it's a little, that's just in one of the faculty lounges. You can see the picture of Margaret Eaton on the right. So again, U of T merger, so the library went there, a couple of scholarships went with it, a number of the faculty went, and the students. So it really kind of allowed U of T to begin, and obviously the university welcomed them into the family of the university. But again, it lost its independence, and some of the issues for it would be just a failure to diversify, certification issues, and the university affiliation did not be good. So I got a phone call once from somebody that found me on the internet. And they said, we lived in a house in Oriel, and we remodeled, and we found a bunch of stuff from Margaret Eaton School. Would you be interested in it? And what it was they had bought the house of the principal, or the principal had lived in, and she had put some stuff up in the attic. Mm-hmm. And so I said, yeah. So we purchased it, but like with a donation kind of receipt, that kind of stuff. So we purchased all these letters and all that kind of stuff. And I had already finished my own work, and so then, I wonder if this will work. The videos weren't working, but maybe this one will. So then I had some students I said, okay, here's some letters from Emma Scott Raff. Can you just write a paper on these letters? And then when she did her presentation, she showed this video. She didn't show this video. Anyways, it's a video of Emma Scott Raff. And I'm going like, what? Like, I thought I knew everything about school. Like, where'd you get a video from her? Well, turns out it had just been posted a week before. And Bob Young, when his parents died, he had these Super 8 films, and he just sent them off to somebody. Says, will these things work at all? Like, some of them are so old that they just disintegrated. But anyways, it was a video of his great-grandmother just walking through a park, and I'm kind of like, wow. So then I thought, well, where does this come from? So I asked the student, like, where does it come from? And she said, well, from YouTube. I'm going like, well, how's it get on YouTube? So then I looked, and it was Robert Young was the person that posted it. And then I'm kind of going, that's got to be Robert Young that owns the Tie Cats. So then I contacted Tie Cats, and then I contacted Bob. I contacted Bob Young, and like Bob's kind of crazy, like crazy good. He just like within a couple minutes he responded. I don't know how he does that, because he owns like a whole bunch of companies. And so he's busy with all of them. He like Lulu Publications. That's another one of his companies. So he goes, yeah, I put it there, but that's my great grandmother. And so, and who are you? Like, so then we connected, and then he was the one that paid for digitizing the whole collection and for having a conference. So again, if you wanted to look at it, you could get it from there, but you could just Google Margaret Eaton School archives, and these are some people that put it together. Kim Smith from Tanamacoon paid $2,000 for the conference as well. So we had this conference. 8 of the presentations are on the website, on my website. So just kind of go for sport, and then you go to Margaret Eaton School. So what's next? Well, keep thinking about the women's voices, digging through the archives of all the student notes and all that kind of stuff, and just hoping for a legacy of women leading women in physical education. I'll come to that in just a sec. So some books by Margaret Eaton School faculty: Dorothy Jackson's book, Mary Hamilton wrote about the Camp Algonquin, 2 dissertations, my own and Anne Lathrop from Brock University. Her mom was a graduate of Margaret Eaton School, so she also, a couple years later, in '97, wrote about it. There's different articles that I wrote, and more articles from other people on Margaret Eaton School, different presentations, some digital presentations, some more digital ones here, remembering Dorothy Walker. And I think, well, what does this all teach us about just organizations? Well, I think leaders with vision, like I just think again of Emma Scott Raff, just wanting to have the school for women and making it happen, and just see where it went. Like we're here today because Mary, in a way, because Emma started that school, and it just kind of morphed into other things and morphed into other things. Financial sustainability is always key. So in her case, she had Margaret Eaton that would just help her out. Emma wasn't the best at finances, so having somebody to just bail you out every time is really good. The credentialing issue is always an issue, and so I think, again, if we can credential people properly, and I think in many ways, even like if I think about PHE Canada today, it reflects a lot of values that Canada has. If it was like, Canada's values were here, PHE was over here, it wouldn't work very well. But at the same time, so I think the organization reflect, but they also need to kind of push us to new places. So in this case, like a school for women, camping is first month experience. Maybe just more comprehensive education and just celebrating, because they would Margaret Eaton School is really good at that, just having large, especially during the Warriors, these large displays and so on. So just celebrating all the good things that are happening. So I think about PHE Canada, just keeping the vision clear, being financially sustainable, having our credentials in order, reflecting, but daring to push the edges to make us better at what we're doing, maybe more inclusive and so on, and just really celebrating. And unfortunately, this doesn't work, but I taped Dorothy. Well, maybe it will work.
Maybe just go on the internet.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll see.
Have you tried the space bar?
Sorry?
Space bar?
Space bar?
End of presentation.
Yeah, you want to be the end, yeah. Anyways,
did you
hit the escape button?
So that's okay. But anyways, Dorothy, I said, Dorothy, do you want to thank Bob for what he's contributed to this? And so she does a lovely little, 20-second little, hey Bob, thank you for supporting it financially, and so on and so forth. And then when I was looking to do this presentation, and we talked, and the question at PHE Canada said, do you think you could get a wine and cheese, John, for that presentation? I said, well, no, I think I can do better. Actually, it was, can Gopher do that? And I said, no, I think we can do better. So I said, how much does it cost to start a fund for some kind of a project? And then I was told $20,000. So then I said, okay. So I contacted Bob Young, and I said, Bob, I'm going to do this presentation at PHE Canada. Would you be interested in starting like a Margaret Eaton School legacy fund to help women leaders? And can you give us 20 grand? And 2 minutes later, okay. Okay. And I said, we kind of like wine and cheese to celebrate that. Okay. So, there we are. And so this gives you kind of a way too fast kind of presentation on Margaret Eaton School. Like I said, we could sit in the bar and talk stories and stories about these students. And when I met them, and like one lady, like in Aurelia, we were just sitting there, and she was like 80, 85 years old, and she goes swimming every morning. And
in the lake.
And I'm like, wow. She says, yeah, the first part's a little bit muddy, but then when you go out, it's fine. And it was just like, wow. So anyway, so I don't know how PHE Canada is going to format this whole thing and so on, but the idea was to remember Emma Scott Raff, the PHE Canada's roots in the school, and to encourage women leaders like the school wanted to, and hopefully PHE Canada can share some of that money with women leaders at some point. So we'll stop there, we'll party.